253rd meeting of the Equal Employment Practices Commission is called to order. We begin with the roll call of commissioners. Executive Director Jean Victor, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Alderman Benan,
Present.
Assistant Chair and Commissioner Elaine Reese,
Chair, present.
and Commissioner Manoska Alcantara.
Present.
I move that we approve the minutes of November 4th, 2021.
Let me call for it. So we have quorum. So next, I call for a motion for the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion?
I would so move.
We have a motion moved by Commissioner Reese. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second by Commissioner Alcantara. Any discussion? All in favor for approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Okay, so all in favor of approval?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Hearing none, to approve the minutes passes. Next order of business falls under old business. In the old business, we have the continuation of the conversation of the 2022 to 2025 EEPC quadrennial plan. That's in our packets. Are there any questions on the plan?
I continue to have a concern about the newly elected position. So as of January, we have a new controller and new borough presidents. None of them, to the best of my knowledge, are re-elected. These are people that are first being elected into positions. I assume are working on assumption is that the HR person remains the same, but that may not be true. I think it's a mistake for us to begin those audits early on in the year. I think they have to, at the very least, if we're committed to having to do them, because we must do them every 4 years, but that should be done very late in the year.
We have to complete the audit by this year as well, because that's how we measure whether or not we've made our mandate. So if we don't start them and with enough time, we will not be able to complete them by the end of the year.
Well, I think we can not meet our mandate and explain why we haven't done it.
That's for the board to determine whether or not we want to start off not meeting our mandate.
Well, prior to that, let's just see if, there's some that are not elected that we can begin audits on front loaded in the beginning, right? So you presumably look at January 2022 next month as the start of this, start front loading the non-elected ones. I suspect that by the summer, we can have meetings with the newly elected borough presidents and community boards and just explain to them the process and areas that are required of them in terms of documentation, policies, things of that sort, so that we can be as helpful as possible to the newly elected, and then see how feasible it is to then begin in the summer or the fall.
Right.
So as to still meet our mandate.
But my assumption is that as to the community boards, there is probably not going to be the same amount of change. Because often the community board members hold over. So it's not, I mean, certainly as to my community board, there are people that have been there for a long time through various borough presidents. I don't think the problem is as great with the community boards. You should almost front load it and do those up front and just look at the electeds. Truly, there will be a new head in the Department of Emergency Management, and there'll be a new head in the Department of Social Services. But the chances of those entities removing the person who's in charge of HR, I think, is lower than the chances of the controller.
There's one thing though that we should note is that the community boards have a much more truncated audit than the other agencies do. So if we're only looking at a handful of standards for them, and hopefully if things go correctly, they should be in compliance when we walk in the door because they've been, monitored before in the past. So hopefully it won't be a huge lift. And with the handful of audit standards that we do have to hold them to, if we hold their hands and get them through this, hopefully it shouldn't be a heavy lift. I'm hoping.
Yeah, no.
Well, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Historically, we audit the borough president's offices first because they are responsible for issuing the policy, the complaint investigation procedures, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to make sure basically like they get their house in order first before we then go and audit their community boards. Because if they're not in compliance, then we can't expect the community boards to reach out to them for guidance, help, assistance. So our plan was to start the community boards, there's 15 of them, mid-year, because they do have a truncated audit, they have a truncated compliance monitoring because they only have about approximately 7 standards. But most of them relate back to the borough president's offices. So if we don't audit the borough president's offices early in the year, it's gonna push back all 15.
It's only the Bronx that you're auditing anyway.
No,
The community boards are the Bronx.
Bronx and Staten Island.
So theoretically, you could audit those two borough presidents, theoretically, start them, and then not do the controller, and not do Manhattan, and not do Brooklyn, until later on in the year. Theoretically.
I think we should approach this as we had spoken to about in the past as a board, you know, as from an educational perspective and just a technical challenge. I mean, this is a situation where much of the policies, much of the infrastructure is there, right? But it might be unbeknownst to the new leadership,
Right.
to the newly elected people. So it's really a matter of hand-holding, educational, where somewhere on your C drive, you have a shared C drive, somewhere in your C drive, there's a sexual harassment prevention policy in your office that should be shared with community. Community boards might have new district managers. They may not know that. So just really just walking people through the adaptive, you know, learning process of this. You should have 2 EEO officers identified and assigned. You know, we think of best practices a male and a female.
We don't do that.
No, 2 separate ones. That's not a best practice. Okay, so whatever the latest and best practices, you know, just letting them know that, you know, someone may not have told you that in the transition, or there may not be that chapter in the transition document that you to assign an EEO person, or it may be. So it's just a matter of meeting with folks beforehand, letting them know this is not anything of a gotcha. This is more of these are the policies and procedures and practices that we feel that you will be evaluated against, right? You know, and to the extent that you need time to locate these things and to make sure that they're fulfilled, we're willing to work with you. But I think we're beholden by this whole having to audit by every 4 years, so we really need to stick to that. We're auditing, for example, Brooklyn and Manhattan borough presidents, but their community boards not until a later date. So with those borough president audits, it will be a great opportunity to let them know, share all of this with the community boards. This is what is expected. When we do audit the community boards, we may or may not have to talk to you, you know, things of that sort.
So what are there specific entities that you think that you want us to delay our start of the audit, not initiate in January like we normally would?
I would say the borough president of Manhattan, the borough president of the Bronx, borough president of Brooklyn, the borough president of Staten Island.
Well, Staten Island, we're doing their community boards as well this year.
Yes, but it's only 3 communities, so that's less of a lift.
Okay.
So we can waive the controller's office. And unless Commissioner Reeves or Commissioner Alcantara identify others that may benefit from greater advanced support, you can let us know.
I'm down at the very bottom, the Kings County District Attorney is also being elected.
There you go.
So,
That's a follow-up audit, so it's a shorter audit, so it shouldn't take as long.
And that's Eric Gonzalez, so he's been around the block, I think.
and to some extent, so has, the newly elected Manhattan Borough President, I think was in the city council.
But they wouldn't,
Mistaken, but
yeah,
not,
but they wouldn't have been audited.
but he would not have been audited. So it's really, they're in charge of the leadership for their group, and they've not been through it all. They need to have some understanding before we start
Audited.
looking auditing it.
So
Yeah.
we have The handful that you just mentioned, plus the community boards, which we can initiate later on in the year. We can get, speak to the board as the year progresses to determine when that would be most appropriate. But beyond those, I'm assuming all the others we can initiate in January. If not, if you review this after and you think that a change needs to be made, let us know, because we're not sending out the initiation letters until January. And we can wait till the next meeting. I don't think we should, but because we really want to get started on this.
No, yeah, we should send out the initiation letters. Is an introduction to the audit schedule, right? Because this is a transition year, initiation letters language, maybe 1 or 2 sentences ought to be adopted for this transition period, letting them know that we know that there may have been transition at the agency head, maybe even at the HR head, but much of what we're asking for is already, somewhere in the system or in practice and as policy.
Or part of what they're inheriting when they're inheriting. So the person from Department of Social Service, HRA, DHS, it's a huge entity. And I'm relatively certain that the EO officer probably remains in place. Probably doesn't get changed.
Well, the other thing too is our audits are historical. So even if it's a brand new person coming in, they're not going to be required to do something at that point. They're not going to have to start doing underutilization studies or anything to that effect. They'll be looking at what was done by a prior administration. If it wasn't being done, then that's when our compliance monitoring kicks in and we work with them for those 6 months to make sure that we can get them where they need to be. So it's not we have to start doing all these things immediately. It's a historical look back, and if things are not in place, then that's when we put them in compliance monitoring for those 6 months.
I understand that, but if I'm a new commissioner and have no idea of what EEPC has ever done before, and I've hired Alice to come in, Alice has no knowledge either. And the fact that we come in with this letter saying you have to respond by X day would be something that I'm not terribly happy about. What I think we're trying to do, and I think what the chair has just said, that because the transition periods are newly appointed, this is something that has been fairly routine, is implemented. And even if you have newly appointed someone at HR, your own systems are in place to do this with some ease. I mean, I think that's the kind of letter or the kind of statement you're looking for.
Yes, exactly.
No, and I agree completely. I'm just saying, I think that based upon the type of audit we do, I think that will be favorably received with the understanding that when we come in, that we're explaining to them that we expect practices to have been in place, that if they're not, we're not playing the blame game. That's not what we're here for. We're here to help.
But I'm not even talking about blame here. I'm talking about workload. I'm talking about, I come into a new job with 400 things that have to be accomplished. Dealing with Department of Social Services, I've got a homeless issue I've got to deal with. I've got to worry about the shelters. I mean, and suddenly we come in with, we want numbers by June. I'm new to the game, and boy, I'm going to put that aside because I got big problems. I'm trying to figure out a way, and I think, as the chair has indicated, to make this appear to be routine, minuscule, although it's new to you. This is something that's not really going to upset anything and not take too much weight.
Well, one of the things
Isn't that where you're coming
No,
from?
it's exactly the 1 or 2 sentences in the letter, but it's just the relationships building and getting out to meeting folks as well.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. One of the things we propose is to meet with the EEO officers, to talk to them and to help get them oriented so that they're not floundering and saying, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah, it's to the same point.
Is there anything else on old business dealing with the quadrennial plan? Hearing none, let's go to the EEPC jurisdiction libraries. We finally have the full-fledged law department memo. Are there any questions regarding that? It's pretty much what we thought the response would be, but now we have it in writing, which is always a good thing. Hearing no discussion points on old business regarding EEPC jurisdictional libraries. Next, we go to new business. The new business item is on the new date for January 22nd, for January 2022. Support, assume that means a new meeting date, correct?
Yes, we originally had the 2022 calendar on the agenda, but due to recent information that we changed the dates, rather than establish a whole agenda in one day, we figure we can start off with one date and we'll have the new agenda for 2022 at the January meeting for your approval.
And is this January 2020 date already established and you need us to confirm, or you want us to discuss what date should be?
Discuss what the date should be because our original date was not
So-
available for Commissioner.
Alcantara?
Yes.
Okay. So, and if we want to continue the tradition of Thursday, what would be the next Thursday date? And then Commissioner Alcantara
Yes.
and Commissioner Reese, if you maybe, once they propose this new date, if you can take a look at your calendars
Okay,
to see if it's convenient for you.
perfect.
I believe the 27th.
So January 27th,
Yeah, for the next board meeting?
for the January board meeting, correct?
Perfect.
January 27th,
Yes.
yes, Commissioner Reese?
I don't know, I mean, I don't have my calendar. Why don't we just say yes and I'll.
If everyone confirms, then we'll take that date and we'll create the rest of the calendar,
Okay.
adjust it appropriately as we need to without having to change too
I'll
many
get
dates.
back to you before the end of the day.
Okay, without trying to change too many dates of the other one.
Yes, exactly. We're just trying to make sure that we're not having a meeting and then like 2 weeks later having another because there probably will not be much on that agenda in terms of audit and compliance work because.
Excellent. Next order of business is under new business. No, pardon me, next order of business is the audit update. The 2022 audit development update, and I guess for that I turn to Director of Compliance, General Counsel Jennifer Shaw.
So we have been working hard to develop this employer practices audit with a focus on underutilization. We've been writing out the standards, which we're very close to finishing. I think we're just tweaking some language at this point. We anticipate having them done by the end of the week. And we are also moving forward with getting those standards into our SurveyMonkey for our preliminary interview questionnaires and our team admin, which is our audit software that we use for both the audit stage and the compliance monitoring stage. We're also going to finalize the audit assignments for the next year so that our team can start reviewing prior reports and reviewing prior audits and any other relevant information to prepare them before they get any information from the actual agency. They kind of have an idea of what's going on. So we are very close to finishing the main part, which is the standards. And then from there, everything will follow. And we anticipate sending out the initiation letters in January.
Will
Any
you send the
questions?
standards to the commissioners beforehand so we can approve them before you send out the letter?
Of course. Yeah, we're not sending out the standards to the entities. We're just saying in terms of circulation amongst our team so that they can become, start familiarizing themselves with what they're going to be looking at in the upcoming audit. Because we do have a couple of new analysts. We want to give them as much information ahead of time, to get them up to a good start. But
So these are the internal audit standards that we use in the audits that will face. But the document itself is not shared externally.
that's correct. Yes. And the audit standards are substantially similar to the ones that were sent and circulated amongst the board at the last meeting. Like I said, the sum and substance is the same. It's the tweaking of the language, including some of the suggestions you had made at the last meeting.
Yes, and so that it replaced the or under the distribution policies to kind. And any other comments around the audit update? Next order of business is the compliance update, and we continue with Jennifer Shaw after she takes a sip of her water or juice.
Sorry,
We got keeping you busy
I'm
here.
doing a lot of talking today. So I'm very happy to report that of the agencies that we initiated in 2021, we have completed all of the agencies, but for one, which is still in compliance monitoring, their compliance monitoring period ends at the end of this month. There is another agency that is not on the agenda because they only finished their compliance monitoring, their corrective actions, finishing them up yesterday. So they'll be on the next meeting, but they're done. So really, we are in great shape. We only have one agency that may get a partial compliance, or hopefully will not. We'll be finished by the end of the month. And I have 3 resolutions going up to resolution 51, which I believe is more than or at least equal to the highest the agency has ever issued in 1 year. Yes.
Now, the one agency that may be partial or non-compliant, recent correspondence with them, would you say have been getting increasingly more receptive or responsive?
They've been responsive throughout, and they've been chipping away at their corrective actions. Just this morning I looked and I think they have implemented an additional 3 or 4 out of the 10 that are remaining. So we are hopeful that we can get them into full compliance by the end of the year.
Any questions on the compliance update? Now we have 3 votes to take, if I'm not mistaken, regarding compliance resolutions. Now for the 3 votes for compliance resolution, I'll turn it over to Executive Director Jean Victor to read them off, and then you can take the votes accordingly.
Sure, certainly. So first one is resolution number 2021 AP/253-063 from 2021 C49 Department of Veteran Services. Second one is resolution number 2021 AP 253-904 2021 C50 Queens County District Attorney. The last one is resolution number 2021 AP 253-942 from 2021 C51 Bronx County Public Administrator.
Since all resolutions directionally are in the same sentiment, if you don't mind, maybe we could bundle resolutions 1 to 3 and just vote on that bundle. So do we have a motion to approve resolutions of 1 to 3 for the Department of Veteran Services, Attorney, Bronx County? Do we have a motion?
You got what I seconded.
Yeah.
Right, so we have a motion from Commissioner Alcantara,
Yes.
seconded by Commissioner Reese. All in favor? Say
Aye. Aye.
All in favor, all opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you for that. Next, we have on the order of agenda, the research update. So a brief discussion on underutilization. For that, we turn to our Director of Research Initiatives and Public Hearings, Leticia Camba-Boom.
Good morning. So I'm going to start off sharing just some brief information on underutilization, basically indicating that it serves as the foundation for the analysis of the development of our report that satisfies the Local Law 13 of 2019 mandate. We are currently in year 2 of a series of 10. The Cs 961 underutilization report, which is provided to us by DCAS, offers a snapshot of 75 New York City entities with underutilization that really are the focus of the year 2 report. The Cs 961 underutilization report offers to us a snapshot of the available workers versus those that are employed by entity, race, ethnicity, and gender. And lastly, entities designated with underutilization in the 4th quarter of fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 allowed us to consider year-over-year trends in underutilization, consider the efforts of entities in reducing underutilization, and engage in deeper analysis through regression model testing. So that really served as the basis for our year 2 report. And if it's okay with you, I will move to the second item.
Yes, prior to moving to the second item, I'd like to first consult with the commissioners, and Commissioner Alcantara or Commissioner Reese have any questions, not regarding the report, right? That's not where we're at this point, just in general around the utilization.
Just a
Yes, Commissioner
question
Reeves?
about the seeds data. Um, it- how, given that the seeds data, our own city data,
Mhm.
how comfortable are you in how that data was collected and qualified, or you don't have, I guess the better question is, do you have any objective knowledge of the accuracy of that data?
So we've been in communication with DCAS relative to the data, and they've shared with us some of their concerns relative to the underutilization data. They recognize that their availability data analysis has not been updated recently.
How
So,
old is it?
it's been about 5 years since it's been updated, but they said that they wanted to hold off until the new census data was released. And now that that census data is released, there are plans in motion to update the availability data. So the concern, of course, is that the underutilizations, calculations are based upon that availability data. So yes, we'd like to have more recent data, and we indicated that in our conversation with them, but we've also referenced that in the first draft of the report. So
It seems to me that when you do an executive summary report in plain language,
Mhm.
that limitation ought to be magnified,
Mhm.
made very clear that you are limited, that we are limited by the basic data we have received, which is the data the city is using.
Mhm.
And that it is 5 years old, and therefore, based on that data, here are our findings.
no,
But I think we want to make that very clear. Is everybody in agreement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I would add to that in terms of not only the clarity over the data sources themselves, right? But also, I think we need to aspire to greater clarity across the report in general, in terms of the audience, right? How would this report be useful and understandable and digestible to the city council?
Exactly right.
How would it be digestible, understandable to the agency heads, some of them which will be here, in terms of what of this 100 pages or so should I really draw my attention to?
Yeah.
And in an actionable way. Because, the report, let's say, might have 5 findings hypothetically, right? Or, maybe overwhelmingly have more than that. But let's say hypothetically has 5 findings, and 3 of them might be like tiny agencies that don't move the needle any, and 2 might be like humongous agencies. To give them all equal weight or equal coverage or equal, language without really punctuating what moves the needle, in a 50,000 person agency versus a 14-person one, really does a disservice to really trying to push
Well,
the improvement in terms of the theory of change. So I think, if we can, it will require multiple iterations, but each time, like, how can we make it less jargon, less, technical, more digestible, more understandable? Because it's not an entirely easy topic to really grasp.
it seems to me that the executive summary can really do that for everybody. It's not only the city council. The city is the largest employer in the city. It's and the reason for doing this analysis. So the citizens of the city who pay for all of these employees, with basic fairness within the government itself. So it's something that the executive summary has if you will, another reader, which is the press. And you want to be sure that you show how we have been fair in employment and how there are still places where we need to be better in employment. Having read through the back half of it, I must tell you, in some of the job titles and some of the places where those job titles were not as fair as they might be, were not surprises. It is not a great surprise to see that there aren't a lot of women in the Department of Sanitation. it is not a great surprise to see, because we've had women from the fire department come in and complain about the fire department. It is not a surprise to see that that is still area of need, a need of improvement in some job titles. So to your point, I think the executive summary, very clear and, for want of a better phrase, in Dick and Jane language, simple, first grade primer language, can make the point to the various people who are interested in it and to the people who should be interested in it. And so there will be a new commissioner, just as there is now a new female police commissioner coming in. And those are probably, and I just listened today to the new chancellor, and I was really taken by his language and his experience and what he wants to do with the Department of Education. So assuming that we have new players, this comes out as being good information for them as to how to make the workplace fairer under their chairmanship or control. So I think the executive summary, I'm repeating myself for the fourth time, but I do think the executive summary in very plain language is the way to treat it. And then you leave the stuff that's written in research-itis, for want of a better term, as it is, but you cite it. So you have, this is the finding in sanitation, see pages number and the various references within it. And so if the reader wants to go read the research-itis, that's fine, but your finding is clear.
So yeah, user-friendly, ease of reading, and recommendations that are actionable, and customized for specific, for the appropriate bodies to take with the power and scope to take their appropriate action. I think really punctuating the city council and the agency heads, the EEO officers, as our special audiences, I think would all serve. And as Commissioner Reese mentioned, to the extent that we want journalists and others to get these very nuanced concepts and research right in their reporting. It may not read beyond the executive summary, so that's an area that needs to be additional. Easy to understand. We have now a status of the local law 13 report year 2, which is a segue, I guess, to what we were just talking about.
Yes. Thank you. So today I'm really going to just share a high-level overview. As Commissioner Reese just indicated, the report in and of itself is about 130 pages. So thank you. So I'm just going to share our efforts to date. We certainly learned a lot in the development of the first year report that we used to incorporate into the second year strategy. So we're pleased that we were able to get the first comprehensive draft completed at this stage in the game, which is well above where we were at this time last year. So the preliminary version has been sent to you. We will send to you another version later on today that has the information, page numbers, the draft, all of that kind of information included in it as well. Just some high-level findings. Right now, we were able to see that, of course, women were included in this year's report in response to the decision that the commission made. We also want to highlight that Black workers have the most instances of job group underutilization, despite being comparable in number and percentage to white workers overall in the workforce. Female workers had the second most occurrences of underutilization across job groups. There was some overarching factors that were, of course, incorporated into this report. Things like the city instituted a hiring freeze in March of 2020. So certainly that was going to impact all hiring decisions.
There's another interesting piece. You point out that if they're competitive titles, the underutilization just decreases, which I think is something to highlight. So even as to women and Blacks and whatever, once there's a competitive title and a civil service listing, the underutilization decreases. It's not diminished, but it decreases. And that's an interesting finding.
So as we completed the initial draft, we will continue to vet this document. Last year, we engaged DCAS, OCEI, CUNY Central. We offered them the opportunity to provide for us feedback on the report. We will again plan to do that early next year. And lastly, another thing that we did this year was we included a entity assessment, an assessment of entity effort, which afforded us the opportunity to look at annual plans and quarterly reports. It also allowed us to look at year-over-year underutilization data. And if there were findings of an increase in underutilization or decrease, it gave us the opportunity to capture that information, which will later be analyzed and shared. So we'll be able to celebrate those entities that are doing a really great job in addressing underutilization, and then at the same time, as entities continue to be challenged, we'll be able to offer to them additional support. So we will continue to vet the document, but plan to have it completed by February of 2015.
Responding to the chair's position beforehand,
Commissioner
a
Reese?
small,
As I see your inquiry, I just maybe allow the presentation to finish, and then I'll make sure I'll call on everyone that's raising their hands. And I'm also looking at Commissioner Alcantara, so if you need to interject, Commissioner, I'll be able to identify you as well.
I was basically
Perfect, thank you.
we will continue to vet the document until, with an aim of getting it completed and submitted by its February 15th deadline.
No, we have
Wait,
a meeting scheduled,
Let me,
in
is this-
February.
I'm sorry, say that, Commissioner Reese, let me just hear this point and then.
Yeah, we have a meeting scheduled in February. It falls after the 15th, which is when the report is due. So we want to get the final report to you at that meeting, at least by that meeting.
but we have the January meeting, we have the new date, it's January 27, which is more than enough time for you to make it February 15.
Right.
If it's completed by January 27th, we're fine.
And if it's late, right, a little bit late for the right reason, I think. Range for that. Commissioner Reese?
Yeah, I was going back to your point of the difference between agencies, small agencies and large agencies. If you look at some of the underutilization within small agencies, it's hard to make a difference if there hasn't really been a hire.
Mhm.
If the title is there and it's fairly stagnant, and assume a white male holds it for one of something, on any other, unless you fire that person, which you're not gonna do. You really are they're gonna be stagnant in underrepresentation. So I think in some manner, again, based on utilization of an executive summary, some statement ought to be made as to the differences in the sizes and the ability to quickly remedy underutilization. And it's harder if you have less job titles, fairly clear to everybody involved, but maybe it's something that you have to state sort of openly so that there's an understanding of what we're talking about, that we have units that may have 20 employees versus a unit that has 50,000. And that the difference, as you find it when you do audits as well,
That's right.
the difference in that alters their ability to do some of the things that maybe everybody would want them to do, but they just don't have it. There aren't women who paint bridges.
Exactly right, and the report, I only got it last night, I think, and it's a lot to go through. I don't, in my opinion, think it'll be ready by February 15th, because I think we really need to, getting it in language that people can understand is not as easy, right? Then also, I would like it to be, my devil's advocate position in terms of the methodology, the data sources, and to the extent that there's critiques or varying ways of understanding this, and would like it to be footnoted so that it's not like we haven't looked at alternative. And in terms of the interpretive, interpreting the findings, as Commissioner Reese mentioned, we need to have robust discussions on sensitivity of size, right? So the size driver, competitive positions and large organizations being particularly more challenging in this regard than smaller ones, and why that might be, and why that might not be. And that ties into actionable recommendations, right? We don't want to make recommendations that are not realistic or unactionable because they're artifacts of something else, right? Just not. And then the underutilization concept, putting that in more layperson's, terms. So, because most people think of utilization like as representation, and it's not, So, you can have, just because, let's say, Latinos are 30% of the population of New York City, right? You could have an agency that only has 10% Latinos, but it doesn't mean they're underutilized. Right? They might be underrepresented, but they might not be underutilized because they frankly didn't appear in the job group categories, right?
Yeah.
So most people have a philosophical or a theoretical or a moral value judgment on representation. Right? I want to see people represented in equal numbers. But this is kind of like a steps way into the equation. We're not we're not looking at the front end in terms of opportunity, in terms of access, in terms of eligibility. So, we're just judging or evaluating or auditing the available. We're not making any judgments as to the fact as to why more people are not available or eligible in certain categories. Right? So I think most city council members and most agency heads and most citizens and taxpayers have a lens on equity. I think so. We have to really specify what we are and are not doing. Right. So that we're clear, not held to account or evaluated upon why is the workforce not more diverse, or why is it that's not necessarily in our theory of change, and that's why the logic model is so important. That's not necessarily the needle that the audits themselves move, or the underutilization itself addresses. Although it addresses one aspect of it, that it should be representative of the actual pool of eligible applicants, job categories. So I think because of that, additional 2 or 3 paragraphs of phrasing to help, answer what are we answering? What are we not answering? I think that's helpful for council members.
I think also that we should have like a summary of the key findings, because few people are going to read the whole document. And some people just want to see, what are the main findings of the document. I see the census does like digests of whatever reports they put in, or fact sheets of the reports that they put out. I think that it would be important to add something like that, because this is a lot of data, and some people are, they're not going to go through the data, and we should make it easy to read in that sense, from my perspective.
I totally agree, and said it earlier that it should be an executive summary. That being said, it should be in plain language, and
Yeah,
if you can get it in 1 page, I applaud you, but
Yeah.
no more than 2 pages.
I
No more
agree.
than 2 pages.
I agree.
Is this something that we're considering a hearing around or conference around or educational?
Well, underutilization in general.
Yes, okay, excellent. And it'll probably coincide around or little thereafter the release of the report, right?
Yes, the report is released in mid-February, then the public hearing conference symposium should be probably late spring.
Or if it's released in March, maybe we could have it in June. Because it helps create awareness, raising.
Might even help create some journalistic coverage with the conference.
And so yeah, so I think it's a great, it was great reading, great first start. I think a lot in there and some stuff that deserves, contrarian viewpoints, right? You know, even, the COVID, right? I think that needs to be teased out more, how in one aspect, COVID has been good for women and good, well, it's bad phrasing, right? And so COVID has resulted in higher utilization of women and I think Black category in ways that we need to really tease out more methodologically to make sure that you know the findings are sound and valid. Any other, but great, a lot of work. First of all, you know, thank you and kudos to your team and to the EEPC staff for the work that has been put in so far, and it's gotten us to a good place to be able to then react to the methodology, to the research, to the findings, and to how it's written, so that we have very good things to build upon when we can start to go.
Chair, if you don't mind, I'm gonna just overrule Letizia on one thing. Unless you want it, I won't have Letizia resend out everything with page numbers. Let's just work on the document. We're going to revamp the document and we'll get that back into.
That's much better, yeah. My printer will be happy.
And there's some, without the whole document, there's some areas of specific parts of the document that I may send emails that I would like to dig a little explore that. The next iteration, I would only want this part. Any other questions?
Well,
Yes.
I'm gonna go to one page, 113, and I think it just highlights what we've all been talking about. If you go to page 113 to the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, and I'm taking my mask off just to read it, otherwise you'll never hear me. Although the additive nature of linear regression models means a determination of underutilization cannot be determined before summing the coefficients for controls and other variables held constant, the large negative coefficient estimates suggest, on average, strong and persistent effects suppressing job group utilization by 2 standard deviations for Black workers in 7 of the 26 job groups, female workers in 3 job groups, Hispanic workers in 2 job groups, and Asian workers in 1 job group. This suggests an imbalance between the expected workforce incumbents and the actual workforce incumbents in those job groups, and could mean the city is systematically failing to attract, develop, hire qualified candidates for the underutilized demographic group. 3 points I want to make. 1, it's not in a language I understand. 2, it's important in telling me that as to these affected workers, Blacks, females, and Hispanic and Asian, that certainly in certain job skills, there is a problem. You haven't delineated what those job groups are. And for the reader, I would be interested in knowing what they are, so I have some substance to what's going on. And third, it is highly important that we, at least looking at these numbers, think that the city may be systematically failing to attract, develop, and hire qualified candidates from the underutilized demographic group in these job titles. Because it's not just hiring them, it's actually the job titles that you found it in. So it seems to me that this finding, which I found terribly important for the report and would put in an executive summary or in some manner just translate it here, is just, it is important, but I don't understand it completely. So I think that underscores your point about translation and underscores the point I've been making, which is this, it's an important finding and it should be somehow highlighted in an executive summary. And maybe I'm making the executive summary too long, but I don't think so. I think this is just a couple of sentences up front as to what the finding is. And then I want to repeat once more the limitation that the seeds data itself has given to us, and that should really be upfront in the executive summary. This is the best we could do with what we got.
Noted.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm finished, that was.
Any other points on local law 13, report year 2? Again, Leticia, thank you for the work of you and your team, compiling and analyzing, presenting all of this data. And we look forward to the next interim report leading into a final. Next, we go to executive session. Actually, that's the whole agenda for the open meeting section. So next, we're gonna need to a motion for executive session, right? So next, do I hear a motion to exit public session and go into executive session?
So moved.
We have a
Yeah.
moved by Commissioner Reese. Do we have a second?
Second,
By Commissioner Alcantara. All in favor to exit public session, go into executive session, say aye.
aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. We are now in executive session.